Yeah.
abundance. It's just
Yes.
waiting out there, but you are blocking it with your
Yeah.
money stories. I spent 14 years in investment banking and private banking. And today I'm the founder of Your Finance Mind. I help the everyday people, professionals or entrepreneurs to get clarity on their finances, overcome their money fears, and become a more confident investor. My family, to be frank, they were not very good with money. We are
Okay.
middle class and we sort of lived paycheck to paycheck. It was only when I grew up later on, when I started working and being surrounded by more wealthy people, that I really saw the difference. And I was trading or investing the family money on my own. So in my expat WhatsApp group, I just asked, is there anyone who is into investing? And 20, 30 people joined that group. I decided to try the coaching and I realized that it was really natural for me because I already had all the knowledge from my
Yeah.
years of banking experience. The fear that I have is always about standing still,
Mm.
not growing.
And I always feel that if you're in a race purely to make money, it's a race that you're going to lose.
The key, I feel, to wealth or being truly rich is to live a life that you love so much, that you love to wake up every morning doing what you like.
Hi, Dina. Welcome. How are you?
Hi, Paul. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. Well, listen, I'm so privileged and honored that you're doing your first ever podcast with us. Thank you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
What I'd love to do is for the few people that may not know you, can you just give a quick introduction before we unpack your amazing career journey thus far?
Right. So I'm Dinah Poehlmann. I'm a coach for people who want to be more confident in investing. And I'm a mom, a Singaporean, married to a German husband. And that's where my surname comes from, Poehlmann. Okay. And I have a daughter. She's 12 years old this year. And at the same time, I'm also an expat living overseas and working from home and also an ex-banker. So before becoming a coach, I spent 14 years in investment banking and private banking. And today I'm the founder of Your Finance Mind. And I call myself a finance mindset coach. I help the everyday people, professionals or entrepreneurs to get clarity on their finances, overcome their money fears, and become a more confident investor.
I love that. And that's how I came across you because of your content. And, one of the things, because, I'm also from the world of private banking, that I find most everyday Joe on the street is just not knowledgeable about investments. And I think what you do is certainly help with that. Now, before we get stuck into that, share with us your journey. Like, so for example, you grew up in Singapore. Did you always know you're going to end up in banking or was it by chance?
Well, it wasn't really planned, but I actually grew up in Singapore and I was educated all the way in Singapore in till university as well. So I went to NUS and at that time I was doing quite okay in school and I had an interest in marketing as well as I was good in finance. Okay, so I had to decide between the two. And something just asked me to take finance. Sometimes you go into yourself and let the intuition decide, and it says finance. And so I went in that direction. And before I graduated, during those career fairs, I got a job in DBS,
Okay.
the local bank in Singapore. So that's how my banking journey started.
But no, your mum and dad didn't speak to you and say, hey, listen, we want you to go. They were not from the banking world, no?
No, definitely not.
So I'm just curious because my kids are about to go to university, hopefully soon. And, our generation talks to our kids a lot. My parents didn't talk to me at all. What about yours?
Well, my family, to be frank, they were not very good with money. We are
Okay.
middle class and we sort of lived paycheck to paycheck,
Okay.
but of course, when we were kids, we didn't know it. That was just our normal life, right? It
Correct.
was only when I grew up later on, when I started working and being surrounded by more wealthy people, that I really saw the difference.
Yeah. What part of the bank were you under?
So when I first started out, I was in credit management. So
Ah,
it's the department where people actually give loans. Okay.
okay.
And I entered right at the time when it was 9/11, 2001, right? So
Tough
my job
time.
was literally calling back loans. Yeah. So that was a tough job. But then later on, I moved into the management trainee program and I went into equity capital markets in
Okay.
2003. So that was probably, I would say, really the start of my career.
You know, I moved to Singapore in '01, and I unfortunately I lost my job back then, but it was such a tough time, right? 9/11 just was disastrous, right?
Right.
In so many different ways. But I think when I don't know if you agree with this, when I place very senior people or in senior roles, I normally always say to my clients, if
Mm,
the person has not been through two or three recessions, do you really want to hire them? Because going through those difficult times, especially as an investor, as a banker, it
yeah.
gives you that real understanding of how not to panic and this will pass,
Mhm.
But what's your take on that? Do you agree that it helps to have that experience under your belt?
Yes, definitely. I mean, there are so many ups and downs, but I must say in my own career, I have been super lucky, right? Because like 2001, when it was 9/11, I was newly hired. So I'm just cheap labor and my job was pretty safe. And I think the next crisis was 2009, the
Yeah.
global financial crisis. And at that time, I literally just moved into a new job with a Japanese bank, investment bank. And um, my friends around me were just losing their jobs, those with good bank names and everything. And my job was so secured again because for the Japanese, they have a 5-year plan and it doesn't matter what happens,
True.
they
True.
stick to the 5-year plan. So it's growth and they were
Yeah.
still hiring and yeah. So I guess in my career, I have been very lucky.
Well, you obviously have been, but sometimes you have to make your own luck. But it's interesting because there are some companies that are conservative, right? Like, for example, some of the Japanese banks, and people always say, oh,
Mm,
it's not that exciting. But how I
yeah,
feel about it is those companies, when there's another recession, they tend not to be shaken. Do you know what I mean? So their conservatism actually works for them, right?
yeah,
Long term. And it's like the financial markets. If you do things
yeah.
short term, you're going to end up with, probably a loss. But if you work long term, it's a lot of benefits. So how did your career progress from there? Like what was the arc of your journey?
Right. I would say that my career really started when I moved into the equity capital markets in DBS Bank. And that was actually the boom of the IPO sector at that time, 2003. And after spending 5 years there doing this IPO structuring and origination, I was headhunted to different boutique firms
Okay.
that were actually building up that space in Singapore. So like Cazenove and Daiwa recruited me to do some deals as well. And after Daiwa, the Japanese bank, a headhunter came to me and said, "Have you ever thought about private banking?" And I was
Ah.
like, "I'm not a salesperson. How do you do private banking?" Yeah. So actually, how I moved from investment banking to private banking, the lady was the one who sort of pitched me to the companies as well.
Yeah. I'm
Mm,
just curious because you clearly had a sense of danger in you and excitement because going from what was very very stalwart, right? Your DBS,
yeah.
equity capital markets, and then moving. Where did that sense of encouragement come from and adventure? Because it's not for everyone.
Right. So for me, I feel that I'm someone who is very open to change, and I always love to have a challenge. I guess the fear that I have is always about standing still,
Mm,
not growing. So in a way, I tend to get a bit restless
yeah.
after a while, and I want a new challenge. And I
Did
remember
you
even
did you know that you early, or did you only work it out as you were going through it?
only much later, a lot of things you don't know when it's happening at that time.
True.
So I remember even in the local bank where I worked, I actually went to the department head and say, "Hey, can I do more?" You know, and
Yeah.
that was me. I
How
always
was
wanted
how
more.
was their response?
Well, so the funny thing is, I'm actually from a local bank, and there are many, I would say like scholars that were
Yes,
from other Ivy League schools.
yes,
So these are the people who are normally promoted, right,
correct,
for
correct.
good projects and all. And so I literally had to try to pitch myself against them to also get into good projects.
Well, the interesting thing about that part of your journey is this, and it's a good point to touch upon because people often ask me, like, how do you get promoted? And a lot of people are always saying to me, I always ask them, well, what do you mean by promoted? And everyone always says, I want more money and I want an increase in title. And I always
Mm,
say to them, the truth is, when you get that increase in title, when you finally become an MD, actually, it's an anticlimax because you realize there are typically two levels of MD. So what I try to encourage people is to ask for visibility and influence, and by
mm,
doing exactly what you said, by asking for more projects and
yeah.
underwriting the problems, like leave it with me and let me take care of that. Did you find that it helped you in your career progress?
I believe so, because at least your intentions are visible to your bosses. If you
Yeah.
don't say anything, no one would know, and they will just let you, they will just put you into like a pigeonhole that they think is suitable for you.
Can you talk on that? Because there's been a lot of press recently where people are saying, in Singapore, it's difficult to stand out. You have to put your hand up. But a lot of people are afraid to do so, right? It's like you sit at the back of the class and you just sit there. But, can you speak on that? Because I find that in nowadays doing a good job, or even 10, 20 years ago, in itself may not be enough. Because if your song is not playing on the radio, no one knows that it exists. So
Mm,
actually being seen by stepping up actually is really important to further one's career.
yeah. Well, I can only speak from what I think it is today because I have been out of the workforce for so long. But I guess the key word that differentiates you now is visibility, isn't
Yes.
it?
Yes.
Because there are so many people vying for the same job, the same project. So the question is really, how do you differentiate yourself? And with AI now, you can't differentiate yourself by being smarter, right? Because there are tools that help people to do the job. So other than being visible, I think that really is about the human connection. How do you
Yeah.
relate to people? Do people like you? Do they trust you?
A
Do
hundred
you
percent.
come across competent, like you can make use of resources to help you? So, yeah, it's not about being the smartest person in the room.
One of the things you said earlier, I want to dovetail this to your journey into private banking, that you weren't a salesperson. I think that it doesn't matter what your job is, sales comes into it. I'm married, I've got three kids, and I have to sell indirectly to my wife all the time if I want to get things done, right? Or I always say, if you're a headmaster at a school, you're having to sell your ideas on the curriculum, you're having to indirectly sell to parents in order for them to, enroll the kids into school. But I find the best salespeople don't need to think of themselves as salespeople, but rather as educators, right? So when you moved to private banking, what was the role? Was it a relationship manager role or an investment
Yes.
role? Oh, it was an
Right.
RM role on day one.
It was. So when I moved from investment banking into private banking, it was a lateral move. So I was a VP at that time.
Yeah.
And when I started, I was just given a name card in private banking and say, okay, you can go and do your job. So I literally had to look for the clients to bring in with their assets. And, so I just started networking with the people that I already know who had wealth. Okay. And some of them, they knew me from my investment banking days. And so I met up with this guy, I remember, went to his office for a
Yeah.
meeting. And I keep asking him, oh, how's your business? How's this? How's your family? And after like half an hour, he was like, so Dina, can you tell me what you're doing now? Because I'm interested to know about that. And he was actually one of my first client. He was all ready to put his money with me, but I was not asking for it, you know, because
But
I just
listen, that's the point. Most people don't ask.
Yeah. Yeah, because of the lack of self-confidence, I just felt like, oh my goodness, am I really suitable for this job? And yeah, so that
You
was
know,
how it started.
you know, it's interesting. I just had an amazing meeting today with a global CEO and chief of staff. and she's the global CEO of a private bank. And I said to her, I've done private banking for over 20 years. Guess how many relationship managers, private bankers, and I've met in Singapore alone, I've met over 3,000. So I'm going to ask you this question. How many do you think asked me to open a private banking account? And how many do you think asked me for referrals? Have a guess.
Five? Just
One,
a handful. One.
just one.
Wow.
Think about that. So what that tells me is the psychology. Either they think maybe I've got no money, maybe, right?
Mm, yeah.
But the thing that I've learned about private banking, if you see an Indonesian rubber plantation owner, they don't wear a three-piece suit and a Rolex watch. More often than not, they're in their Wellington boots and they're pretty casually dressed. And why I say that is interesting is I love sales. And what I've learned about sales is it's the same in martial arts. Never underestimate anyone and always ask. And referrals to me in business, in all sorts of business, is so powerful. So for example, now if we have a great chat today and you bump into a friend who's a business person and you think they would be great for the podcast and vice versa, hopefully you would speak well of me, connect us, and that would be a warm lead. And then all of a sudden, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, it equals 11. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So then what happened? So then how long were you in private banking? But was that your last job before you decided to leave and become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I was in private banking for 4 years,
Okay.
and I left the job because I became a new mom, and my husband also got a job overseas. So
Okay.
the decision was really, do I stay with my baby and continue to work in Singapore? And my husband would just travel back and visit us occasionally, maybe every other week or something, or we just uproot and move to the new country together. And because my baby was really young, it seems like a perfect timing to say, okay, this is a good time for a break.
Yeah. No, and listen, it's not easy, especially for ladies, right? Because you end up having to make a very difficult decision.
Mm.
And I think the workforce needs to have some more leniency. So last week I had Amanda Lim, who is a 21-time Southeast Asia gold medalist on the show, swimmer. And she shared with me something that was so poignant that, she's single, but if she meets the love of her life, she would very seriously consider getting married and having children now because, her clock is ticking. And, there are some athletes that have children and come back, but it's not easy. And I think it's something that needs to be encouraged a little bit more. Do you know what I mean? So talk about that part of your journey. So when you're a Chinese Singaporean woman marrying a foreigner, thinking about going abroad, what was the kind of feedback from your family and friends?
I guess it was a surprise decision, or like, are you sure you want to do this? Even from my clients. And somehow they put a timeline on it. Okay, so 2 years you'll be back.
Really?
So they give me a timeline
Yeah,
for moving abroad. And I was like, okay, keep that in mind. And even when I went to Jakarta at that time, I remember there was a neighbor who heard that I'm from Singapore, and she just said, "Oh, you'll be back to it. You will be back to Singapore in no time."
yeah,
So
yeah.
that was like what they thought about me as a career woman, leaving the job and becoming a stay-at-home mom.
But that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to speak with you because you see, most people view each other through their own lens or their own experiences. And to break that mold is not easy, right? And, I'm just so curious. So, like, what was the genesis to becoming a coach and starting your business? Because I think what you do, and in principle, anyone that teaches, because think about this in school, I actually think school's a bit wasted. No one learns about things like that we need on a daily basis. They don't understand insurances, or when you get a driving license, actually you need to insure the car. And we certainly never learned at school how to manage money, right?
Mm.
So, but what was the genesis behind? Okay, this is what I'm going to do as the next chapter in my career.
So my whole business wasn't really planned. What happened was that I became a stay-home mom and quite a bored one. I'm just not used to such a slow pace of life. And I was trading or investing the family money on my own. And I just thought, oh, it'll be nice if I have a group of people that I can exchange ideas with. So in my expat WhatsApp group, I just asked, is there anyone who is into investing? We can make our own WhatsApp group. And 20, 30 people joined that group. And I started asking them, so what do you invest in? And one by one, they were all saying, oh, I'm very interested to learn how to invest. I want to
Mm.
learn, no experience. And
And,
suddenly,
and were these, sorry to interrupt, were these primarily ladies?
yes, more
Okay.
ladies.
Okay.
It's a ladies expat group.
Yeah.
So I found that I became the expert in that group.
Yeah.
And since I made a mistake, I said, okay, why not we just meet up once a month at Starbucks and have a conversation about personal finance, investing. We can chat about anything,
I love
so
it.
just sharing knowledge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's huge. In fact, I just saw someone talk about this, who again is a global CEO, basically talking about how much money is out there in terms of, if you take the average populace and if they don't do anything, what happens with inflation vis-a-vis if you invest it? So let's just say $20,000. How much money will you make or will you lose through that process? So it's really interesting. So then what was the next step up where you realize, hey, I'm onto something here. Let me
Yeah.
build something.
Yeah. So I did that for a few years, just monthly meetup. And 2020 happened, COVID. Everyone went back to their home country.
Yes.
And we were all bored at home, right? And I was saying, okay, let's just continue our coffee mornings, but let's bring it onto Zoom. And at
Virtual.
that time, I came up with a topic which was investing during the pandemic. And it was such a hot topic. We were discussing like different stocks, that we can look at that may do well during the pandemic.
Mm.
So at that time, the Zoom group grew. And one of the ladies in that group just asked me to coach her on investing.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was the demographic of some of these ladies? Was it varied, or I'm just curious?
So the most of the people, they are from, I would say, mid 30s to
Okay.
mid 50s.
And
Yeah.
did most of them work at some point?
Yes.
The reason why I ask is this: I've got two daughters, and one thing I always say to them, and my mother always taught me this, is a woman needs to have independence.
Mm,
And you can be happily married, and even if your husband earns more than you, if you don't have your own source of income, are you in the marriage for the right reasons? Are you beholden? And why I'm so curious about this discussion is I want to make sure that my daughters are thinking about investments early on. And what I realize is they don't listen to their parents because anything we say becomes a lecture, right? So they listen to other people. So okay, so then all right, so then what happened? So you coached that lady. How did that go?
So I actually didn't want to do any work, but I decided to try the coaching, and I realized that it was really natural for me because I already had all the knowledge from my
Yeah,
years of banking experience, but it was new to the person and it was really helpful to her. And then the next client came, and basically they are all initially reverse inquiries on the coaching. Yeah.
yeah,
So after I started, I just felt like it felt really comfortable.
yeah.
I'm not stressed out over the coaching. And I started to put all my materials in a more structured way so that I could sort of like make it more replicable. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like it was organic, and because of that, it probably felt a lot more natural, the progress of it. Do you know what I mean? It was
Yeah.
incremental. And
Yeah.
then fast forward, where are we at now? What does the business look like? What are you doing with your time? How are you coaching more and more people?
Mm. So I started with one-on-one coaching and I was happy with that. But the scalability is not really good, right? Because it's still tied to my time. So what happened is I created a group coaching program, which is slightly more scalable. So we
Okay.
meet up like once a week or once every 2 weeks over 4 months.
Oh,
And
nicely.
the objective is for the group coaching is that at the end of it, they understand their finances, their
Okay.
financial situation, and they learned how to invest and put in their own first trade. So self-directed trading. So
And
it's
it's
like a
it's virtual, is it?
it's virtual.
And
Yeah.
now, do you have any men in the group? I
Yes, I
hope so.
do.
Good, good,
Yeah.
good. What's the
Yeah.
balance now? Is it 50-50 or still heavily female dominated?
Still mostly female. So I would say it's 80% female, 20% male.
Isn't It's
Yeah.
interesting, isn't it? Because the world of private banking, there are more female private bankers than there are male private bankers. But I think why you probably are so great at it is because you're not selling, you're educating.
Yeah.
You're guiding and you're coaching. And in terms of the format that you're doing this on, is it, do you have one-to-one coaching clients as well, or
Yeah, I
largely
do.
group? Oh, you do?
I I still love that, so I want to keep it. Um, and it's just targeting different groups of people as well. The group coaching is more economical
Yeah.
and I can reach more people.
Yes.
While the one-on-one, it's much more customized because it's talking about your finances and
Their
your
portfolio.
portfolio. Yes.
Now, I'm just curious, do any of these individuals already have private banking accounts?
Yes,
That
some of
you're
them
you're
do.
you're basically almost becoming like a family office to them.
Just a
In a way.
coach.
Yeah. No, no, when you think about it, you're not managing the money directly, but you're helping them, right? Which is,
Yeah.
I think there's power in that because not everyone's got $250,000, dollars to set up their own family office. But
Yeah.
what a wonderful, and are you enjoying this part of your journey?
I am. And actually, what happens is I started out because people wanted me to teach them about investing, right? And I
Yes.
tried to teach them the technical parts. And I realized that without the money mindset, they actually couldn't take action. So this
Mm.
applies even for the wealthy people. Okay, it doesn't matter how much wealth they have, but there's always that sense of insecurity, uncertainty if they haven't figured out their own money mindset. Yeah.
Talk about that, break it down without giving all your trade secrets away. But I just, anyone that's listening to this that, would want to reach out to you, we'll set that up. But money mindset, because I always feel that most people, myself included, have a bad relationship with money. I know I've always, because I grew up um, okay, and then my dad had a stroke, and then we were very poor. And I
Mm.
started my career at 17. I was a toilet cleaner for 3 months, and I fell into recruitment, and I've been in it ever since. But because of that, and I realize quite often your childhood, you can't escape it. It carries through, right? So in theory, of course, I've got more money now than I did have when I was 17, but my relationship with money is still not great. So, like, where do you start in the process? Do you get them to read a book? Do you do an analysis? Like, where does it begin?
Well, so I have a questionnaire that I ask them to reflect on the questions.
I love
And
it.
once I have that, I have a good sense of where that person is coming from. And then I will ask them to think about certain stories. And most of them happens in childhood. They went through financial difficulties or the parents were always quarreling over money. There are so much negative emotions attached to money that they are
Yes,
so fearful of it. There's absolutely no relationship with it. And when you
crazy.
don't have a good relationship with money, the things that you want
Yeah.
cannot come to you, right? The
Yeah.
abundance is just
Yes.
waiting out there, but you are blocking it with your
Yeah.
money stories.
No, it's true. And it was so interesting because I think people overlook that, right? So a lot of the people, I remember a lot of the guys that work for me, I will recommend that they read a variety of books. But because we're in private banking, one of the books I will recommend to them is about money and investing in their own investing. And a lot of the people, when they're young, they say, well, I don't have any money to invest. I said, but you will have. And you need to understand it. You need to talk about it, right? But people they have an adverse reaction, I find, to reading and even thinking about money. Historically, no one likes talking about it. So, do you have certain things that you ask them to read and watch, or what do you suggest to people in their journey?
Actually, I don't do any of that. I just help them to understand their own money stories. And these are just things that happened in the past. And they need to process the stories. It's literally suppressed and
Yeah,
hidden away.
I
It's
agree.
affecting them subconsciously, but nobody is helping them to process those stories.
Yeah.
Like I'm not sure, do you have friends that you can talk openly about money and the emotions around money in
Only
your
a cou-
community?
only a couple, and it's something I'll give you. And I want to come back to that question. So, a friend of mine who's a CEO of a bank, he always asks me, "What's your number?" When we've had a few drinks, "What's your number?" And I always give him my telephone number, and he goes, "No, I want to know your number, how much you need to retire." And he goes, how much are you worth? Right? Have you got enough? And I always say, "I've got enough." And he goes, "Why don't you answer me?" And I said, "Look, if I give you an answer, I give you a number that's more
Mm,
than yours, you won't like me. Right? That's just human nature. If I give you a number that's smaller than yours, you won't respect me. Right? So it's a lose-lose situation. And there's a story. I'll just share this very interesting story, which I did relate back to that individual. There's a Tolstoy book, and it's about a farmer. This is back in the 18 or 1900s, and he's already the equivalent of a billionaire. And he found out that there's a neighboring village that are giving away hectares of land for pennies on the dollar. And he's heard these guys are idiots. So he decides to take the 3 day trek to this village. And turns out they are giving away all this land for pennies on the dollar. So what they said to him is, wherever you walk from dawn to dusk and you come back, as long as you're back by dusk, that will be the land. We will give it for you this much. And he's thinking these guys are absolutely idiots. And he's smiling at them, and he does the walk around. And as he's just about to get back, he realizes, I've got to get back quickly. So he runs. As he runs, he puts his flag in the ground. They're cheering for him. They give him the deed. And he's thinking, yes. They leave him there. He's very tired. In fact, he's so tired that he has a heart attack and he dies. So the
yeah.
moral of the story, the only land that that guy needed was 6 foot, by 6 foot down, and that was it. So my point is money's a funny thing, and people get obsessed with it. And I always feel that if you're in a race purely to make money, it's a race that you're going to lose. But what you're talking is about wealth preservation and
Mm,
and creating wealth for yourself. But talk to me a little bit about that.
mm. So for me, I feel that the number for retirement is totally irrelevant.
Yes,
There's no need to compare,
yes,
right? Because you need to know what does your retirement look like.
yes,
And for someone else, the retirement will look totally different because
yeah,
money means different things to different people, right? And
correct.
the key, I feel, to wealth or being truly rich is to live a life that you love so much, that you love to wake up every morning doing what you like,
Yeah.
yeah, enjoying your environment, your friends.
So
To me,
going back
yeah.
to your question, you said how many people? I was just thinking about. I've only got two friends that I would openly talk to money about,
Mm,
and even then, I wouldn't. I will listen more than I talk.
yeah.
But is that normal?
You are lucky you have two. Most
Yeah,
people, they are so afraid to talk to anyone, like their friends, about money.
yeah,
And even if they do, the person may not be objective because money is funny. Everyone has a different lens, a different filter, right?
a
And they are
hundred
talking
percent.
to you through their own perspective.
Yes,
But their
yes,
perspective may not relate to you. And that's why, it's very easy to have conflicts over money or
yeah.
why people do certain things, even between couples. Yeah.
I'm just curious if you've got this feedback. So I didn't realize this. A lot of couples have their own accounts,
Mm.
and well, we have our own accounts, our own and a shared account, but like a couple will have dinner and like, oh, I got it last time, so you get it this time, and really, and it's quite interesting. Is that common?
It is common. Okay. So I
Really?
think because I have spoken to many couples, many people, I think the majority of them, they have this hybrid arrangement where they have some joint accounts and they have their own accounts. And then a smaller number, they are fully transparent, they consolidate everything. And the other group is totally detached. You manage your own money, I manage mine. You pay for groceries, I pay the electric bill or something. So they split down the line 50-50. So I guess in the end, it's what works for the couple. But the
Yeah,
question is really, are you comfortable with the arrangement and does it make you feel good, feel secured? And what is the reason that you are not using another arrangement? Like those who are splitting 50-50, what happens if you consolidate the money?
yeah,
What is your
yeah.
fee, right? Yeah.
It's so interesting, and also the other thing I've identified and noticed is a lot more couples are getting divorced now. And apart from the fact that marriage is a sanctity, the whole concept of marriage is not what it used to be. I think it's women are earning money, so they don't need to tolerate any nonsense from their husbands. No one talks about this, but menopause, that changes things. And then the third thing is when the kids leave and the couple become empty nesters, it changes. But I know a lot of couples that are in the marriage because I know one side of it more than the other, but because they know getting divorced means they'll be worse off, and it's kind of crazy. And then you realize, oh, marriage is it can become scary if it leads to divorce, right? Do you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
but money, but the thing about money, it's around us and it should be working for you when you're sleeping. That's the ideal scenario.
Yeah, there's passive income, right?
Yeah.
So active income is always tied to your hours, your
Yes.
time. And
Yes.
passive income is your money going out to work for you or your business working for you without your time involved.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So really, you've never left being a private banker. You're just doing it in a slightly different way.
I'm managing my own money.
Yeah, well, you imagine your own money, and that's as you should be. But you're also helping other people on their journey. And is it very rewarding for you?
It is because my clients, they come back to me with their stories, their testimonials, and how the coaching has impacted them. And I
Yeah,
get all these stories continuously. And I'm just thinking that, oh my goodness, this information has been safe kept for such a long time.
yes,
And it's time to share it with more people because I guess the traditional banking or finance, they are always trying to tell you, like, pass your money to us. We can do it for you.
correct.
Yeah, it's too difficult for you. But
Yeah,
actually, for investing, there are many ways to do it, and you can do it a simple way as well. So I
yeah.
always try to match the investment strategy or style to the person who is managing their own money. And my message is really everyone can be the key steward for your own money.
I
Okay.
love that.
Yeah. And even if you have private banking access, you need to know what you want before you pass your money over.
Yeah,
Otherwise, you are just paying a lot of fees.
yeah. I mean, look, the reality is if you understand it, you even if you work with private bankers that and advisors, that's great, but you need to understand the core
Yeah.
of it, right?
Yes.
It's a very interesting one. And are you also advising couples now and families? Like, will a wife sit down with a husband and bring him to the table?
Yeah. So normally for my coaching, one of the couples come first, the wife or the husband. And after my coaching, they bring their partner in. They said, you have to go through the coaching with Dina too. And
I
I
love
feel
that.
that it is good because then both of them are totally aligned and you can just move forward much faster. You don't have
Yeah.
to keep explaining to your spouse, why are you doing this? Because they know exactly what you are doing.
So, do you have any bankers from any part of the banking industry that are clients? You must have.
Not bankers, but people from
Oh,
finance,
finance.
accounting.
Because no, because what's interesting is a lot of people like bankers, they may not even have insurances. And there's an old adage is that, the last house to get its plumbing fixed is a plumber's house, right? Because they're so busy managing other people's money or creating wealth that they don't have time to do everything on their own. It's,
Mm,
I've placed now 5 CIOs in single family offices, and why the people I placed adore that role, as long as the culture of the organization is great, is because they're getting paid to do what they love. And
mm.
they're also allowed to manage their own money. So, like, literally, you're getting paid to look at the markets, decide what to do, and you're learning from that. So, it's so interesting. Talk to me about your move to Manila and, living abroad, because, just you've been in Jakarta and Manila. Speak on that, because a lot of people are nervous about taking that leap, but it's something that you've done and you've embraced.
Yeah, you mean moving from Jakarta to Manila, right?
Yeah,
Why
yeah.
did I do it?
Yeah, and come and leaving Singapore, because a lot of people are nervous about leaving the nest, right? Singapore
Mm,
will always be here.
yeah, yeah, it is. So I think being an expat give you a really new perspective to life. Because when I grew up in Singapore all along, I love Singapore. But there is just different elements when you are in a foreign country.
Yeah.
And it puts you in a uncomfortable spot again, and you have to start searching for your comfort zone again. So
Yeah.
that may include learning a different culture. You have to learn new languages, and you just become more open-minded because not everyone is the same. They have different backgrounds, different beliefs, and in the end, we can be respectful,
Yeah.
and we learn it through experience.
I love it. And how do you find, if you don't mind me asking, because I'm the product of mixed parentage, how do you find you and your German husband raising a mixed kid? I always think mixed kids are the cutest, right? But how do you find that interracial, experience? Was it difficult in any way, or was your family accepted it?
Yeah. So it was okay. They loved my husband, and having a child with parents from two different countries.
Yeah.
My daughter doesn't know the difference because
Yeah.
she has always been like a third culture kid as well. So in a different country with parents from different countries, everything became normal for her. And
Yeah.
in a school environment, there are many of such third
Loads.
culture kids. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, because my mum was Chinese Singaporean, my father was Irish, and I grew up, in England primarily and a little bit in Ireland. But I always felt that I had the best of three, four different worlds, really. Now that I'm in Singapore, my wife's mixed, and her dad was the president of the Eurasian Association. So our kids are mixed, and I love it. But what's interesting, I didn't really know mixed kids growing up of Asian and well, Eurasians basically. I didn't know any growing up in the UK. But the ones I've met now always found that they had a sense of identity. They had a crisis there where, so if they grew up in the UK, they always wanted to be Caucasian. And I've struggled with it because I always loved my background. And because I look more Asian, I always identified with that to a certain extent because I'd get a fair amount of racism, and you grow thick skin. But I always find it interesting to see how people identify with themselves, and it changes. So if you ask my kids now, because they're so mixed, right? They're so mixed. They just see themselves, and that's exactly what they should see.
Yeah. My daughter looks more like me, but she identify more as a German.
Really?
She's really close with the grandmother
Yeah,
in Germany. Yeah.
I love it. And then talk to me about the lifestyle. What is it like in Manila?
In Manila, well, we are living in this area in Manila that is a little bit like Singapore. It's called Bonifacio Global City. And I work from home. And it's actually a walking town. You can walk everywhere, and the school is
Lovely.
nearby. So everything is just very convenient. I would say it's very efficient for us to be here as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. And when you're managing your money and you're doing what you do, are you someone with like multiple screens up in front of you? I mean, what's your setup look like?
So I'm a minimalist.
Okay.
I try to have as little things as possible, and I just work from my laptop. And
Simple.
literally, I just need my gadgets, like laptop and handphone. I can do my work, my trading, everything
Yeah.
that I need.
I know that, well, that's the thing. It's that easy now, right? And I think that's why I asked the question because a lot of people are intimidated, but you're a good example of how actually it can be quite simple.
Yes. So I must say that when I was building up the business, I also had the luxury of time because my husband had like a full-time job, right? And financially, we were very stable. So in a way, when I built my business, there wasn't the stress of like, oh, I need to make sure I get this amount of income in. And I think that really helps me to build my business slowly.
Of course it does. Of course it does. Now, can you talk about are there any projects or things that you're working on that you're excited to share about, or is it more of what you're doing?
There are some projects in the work. Maybe it's not a good time to talk about it now, but probably if it happens next year, there will be something new. Maybe you can talk about how's the private banking sector currently? What do you see? And also with AI, how does it influence that sector?
It's so interesting because if you look at private banking, the amount of private banks that are registered with the MAS and HKMA today is half of what it was 20 years ago. And there's been a lot of consolidation. And it kind of reminds me when I grew up in the UK, where there were major high street grocery shops like Sainsbury's and Tesco's. And there used to be a corner shop that sold newspapers, chocolates, sweets, cigarettes, anything and everything. And they all started to disappear because those major brands brought them in-house. And I kind of feel that that's happened in private banking. Um, and I don't think it's a good thing because I think there are a lot of people today in organizations that don't want to be in those organizations, but they don't have options to go anywhere else. And that's the challenge with globalization and monopolization. I think AI is something that you have to embrace. If you don't get in front of it, you're going to be behind because what is new today is old tomorrow. And the biggest challenge I find is this: the role of an RM today is different than it was 10 years ago. So 20 years ago, there really wasn't the concept of investment advisor or investment counseling. And 10 years from now, the role of a banker is going to be different again. The
Mm.
reality, all bets are off. So I think now it's a case of who's adapting the fastest. And for me, the dichotomy is this: most CEOs in a private bank in the job today are not going to be in the job more likely than not 5 years from now. So they're trying to build and scale a business really to secure their role for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. But if they're not being measured for what's being built 5 to 10 years from now, what is the longevity of that institution? And therein lies the challenge, right? And I have seen a lot of CEOs, I'll be candid with you, that have created instability and weakness in their own organization by not having real deep succession planning. There is no strong number two, number three. And I think a lot of CEOs have done that to preserve their job. AI is coming for all of us, right? And it's fast. It's happening so quickly.
Yeah.
So I mean, it scares me because I worry about what our children's future will be. Sometimes people don't know, what is this? Was what I was just watching, is it real? Is it BS or not? And it'll be interesting in terms of how things. So imagine if everyone is typing in the same information into Claude and getting the same investment advice, how will that change the pattern of investments? Will it take away the emotional burden that most people, they make bets financially or they make investments based on the emotion of what's going on. And the other interesting thing is I've spoken to quite a few CIOs who've always said to me, look, Paul, we don't really have a crystal ball. We all know that. But the one thing that I think is prevalent for all of us is how do we educate the next generation, the younger, our children?
Hmm.
Why do business classes in school, or just even when you're 16, not have a whole subject matter on investments? How many people are using Pythagoras theorem now in, most of what I learned in school, I don't apply. Nothing that I learned at university, nothing, zero, is applicable in my business life today. So
Yeah.
I think that's the interesting thing, and I think it's incumbent upon us to try to help the next gen. But what's your take on AI and the future of investments and banking?
For me, I feel that at this point, AI can't replace humans in investing yet because they are just generating a lot of data and the human still need to decipher it and put in the trades.
Yeah.
Of course, there could be a lot of development where the AI starts to invest for you, right? But then where's the competitive edge? Because everyone will be investing the same.
Yeah.
So I'm still watching. It's so new. Everything is developing so fast, like what you said. But I think from the private banking side, when it comes to relationships, I think that still holds, and many times people still need a human to assure them that they are on the right track.
A
This is what
hundred
I
percent.
feel.
A
Yeah.
hundred percent. Because you can write something into AI, which is brilliant, but you can shape the next answer by saying, well, I don't agree with that. What about this from this perspective? So I typed this in. I'm an avid sports fan. So I typed in who are the top 10 100-meter runners of all time. and he came out with his results. And I said, this is very one-dimensional. You're basing it on time. You're not basing it on winning gold medals and competition. And he said, you're right, Paul, this is what it should be. And then I challenged it again and changed it again.
Yeah.
So I think there is that. And I'm curious, when you became a private banker, any part of your journey, were you taught about sales? Was there any fundamental training or not really?
There were some courses here and there, but I think it's all learning on the job.
Yeah.
You just push yourself out there and talk to people. Yeah.
Yeah, I find it fascinating because sales is something I'm really passionate about, and I can tell when I speak to someone, oh, they haven't read any sales books, right? So, I always ask people, are you a salesperson? What do you do? And what I find really interesting is most people, the concept of sales is scary. They don't like it. You know what I
Yes.
mean? But the
The
but the re
identity.
yeah, but the reality is we all have to do it.
So in your podcast, I think you do talk to many people in the finance or banking industry.
Yeah.
What are some of the really interesting points that you learned from some of your conversation that you never realized before?
The most interesting thing with successful people, for me, is to look at the patterns that have created success in their journey. And at a very senior level, all senior people have something that no one talks about, which is killer instinct. It's commercial acumen. It's having the courage to put your hand up and request things or to take things on when other people don't and when other people flinch. And I've analyzed that over the years, and that's why I love the nexus between, for example, sports. It could be sports, it could be music, it could be art, but anything at the highest level. If you have a black belt in one discipline, how is that,
Yeah.
applicable in business? And also fear, so fear is a funny thing. So I always use this analogy. If there's a scaffold board on the floor right now, you and I could walk up and down it, even if it was this wide, blindfolded, forwards, backwards. But if you put it 1,000 feet in the sky with no safety net, it would be a very different prospect. And that 1,000 feet represents fear in one's career. So I try to encourage people not to be afraid to ask, but to ask for the right reasons. And going back to that point I said earlier, visibility and influence. Now, some people's
Mm.
careers are by design and others not. But what I've always found is that they've been very focused on challenging themselves. So setting personal best. So like, let's just say if you're an investor, take away the dollar value. But if you say, my best year ever was 12.5%, I got 12.5% return. I didn't lose all my hair like Paul from stress. I wasn't playing poker. It was steadied. It was measured. And then next year you'll get to 13.5%. It'll be interesting. So I'll talk about private banking because we're in the world of private banking. So in the meeting I had today, I said there are a lot of private banks that I feel that either they don't understand this or they overlook this, which is trying to squeeze more juice out of a high performing banker.
Mm.
Because at some point, the board, the chairperson, the CEO says, we want Dinah to have an extra $150 million net new assets. So, Dinah, I want 150 mil, give it to me next year, or else your bonus is going to get clipped. But this is the reality. You're currently got a book of 750 mil. You're running at 100 basis points, which in itself is pretty amazing. And unknowingly, you are running at an optimum. So the only way you can bring an extra $150 million, in my opinion, is one of two things. Either you squeeze more out of your existing clients and for the wrong reasons, and they might not like you very much, and they may leave you, or you try to spend more time focused on business development, which takes you away from your existing clients. And there is a diminishing point of return. So I find that a lot of organizations are not thinking 360 with a lens multidimensionally. Well, hold on. How can we help this person do more? Maybe they need more investment advisory. Maybe we make them a player manager. So, but again, most people are afraid, I feel, to say no. So this is a really interesting thing. 90% of the career coaching people that I work with, not the headhunting side, the career coaching side, that find a new job, before they embark upon that new journey, I encourage them to speak to their current boss and ask for what they wanted, knowing now that they've already got this other job secure. And of those individuals, nearly all of them get what they wanted. which proves the point. If they had asked, they probably could have got it, but they were afraid to. But now that fear's gone because they've already secured a new job. So they were quite laissez-faire in their request. And ironically, guess what? They got it. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it is. So, yeah, the takeaway is really you have to fight your fear and ask for what you want.
Yeah,
And I think
100%.
fear is also a very good indicator in a career. You do more things that make you afraid,
Yes,
isn't it?
yes.
Because it's always going towards a new challenge, pushing the boundaries. Yeah,
It's so important. One of my favorite questions to people when I coach them is, what was the best period of your career, the best quarter of your career? And let's not define it by revenue or earnings. Let's define it by, where were you challenged the most? You know, when you look back, where were you happiest? And the reality is most people have to go back 10 plus years. And that's a very interesting indicator, because I always say, look, if you stay in your current company or you change jobs, you should be looking to replicate some of that. But if you analyze it, when you're a fresh grad in the first 10 years of your career, the learning curve is very steep. So
yeah,
you're learning the whole time. And the more senior you become, the less you learn. But that makes no sense,
yes,
right? And that's why, there's still a lot of ageism in the commercial world. Like, when you're 55, I turn 50 next year, and this shocks me. When you're 55 now, it's like, maybe are you getting a little bit too old? And it doesn't make sense. So think about the retirement age. It hasn't changed yet. The average lifespan has lasted longer. And I always tease my friends about this. I say women should probably marry younger men because women outlast most men, right? Do you know what I mean? But
yeah,
isn't it interesting as people, and for me, one of the other things I find really interesting is most large corporates don't think about the longevity, the energy of their teams. So if you preserve the health of your team
mm,
and they have more energy and they're better achievers, it's better business for you. And the last thing I find really, really interesting is most organizations spend more time, senior people within the organization spend more time navigating the politics internally and
yeah,
surviving the current organization vis-a-vis competing externally with the rest of the market. And I've always questioned that, because I understand the concept divide and conquer and whatnot and creating internal competition. But again, not negative competition. I've always believed a rising tide raises all ships. So these are just observations that I've had. And I just find that if you hire the right people, like, if let's just imagine you are the CEO for the Philippines and I'm the CEO of Singapore, and we're in the same organization, and you're doing great things in part of the business that I don't do, and you're better than me at. And there might be some things I'm better than you at. I'd reach out to you and I'd say, Dina, well, what you just did there was amazing. Do you mind if we have dinner next time we see each other? Can you unpack that so I can incorporate it into my business?
yeah,
And I just think that goes a long way, but it rarely happens.
yeah. Because it's so competitive these days. And
It's so
like
competitive.
the companies, the concept of like long-term job security is not there anymore. In the past, there's always you just work with this company, they'll take care of you all the way till retirement. This
Yeah,
doesn't exist anymore.
it doesn't exist.
Everyone, every company is just trying to squeeze out the most out of someone. Yeah,
It really is interesting, because you can tell a lot about someone's career and longevity. And but one of the things I've always found fascinating is when C-suite practitioners or any senior manager, when they're thinking of hiring somebody new or internally moving people, if they don't think two or three steps ahead, okay, so we're going to appoint Dina as the regional head and not Paul. Will Paul stay? Will he leave? Or we're going to bring someone new in, and Dina and Paul both leave. And, you know, it, I feel there's a lot of uncertainty in business. And it is interesting, it's fascinating, right? And I've obviously made my living as a headhunter, moving people. But I believe that if you have a really happy workforce and that workforce is focused on growing and building, that's the best environment to have, And I'll give you a really good example. So I don't know if you've heard of the Netflix business model. So they've got a benefits employee handbook. And I put my head of Hong Kong, Mark, who's been with me for over a decade, on this part of this policy. So a few years back, I said, look, I'm taking away your holiday entitlement, your leave. And he said, you can't, I need holiday. And I said, no, I'm not taking it away. Like, as in, I'm taking away the concept of it. You can take as much leave as you want. The only thing is, if you're going away for like 2 weeks and you need backup, let me know and I'll make sure you've got backup. And he said, why? And I just said, look, you run your own P&L. I completely trust you. And then that's it. And the irony is, the next 3 years, I haven't measured it for a while, but the first 3 years I measured it. He took less time off. Because the thing about leave, it's not, you know this, as a business owner, I don't measure my leave. I work when I need to work. I do what I need to do. I deliver. That's it, right? But of course, if you did that with a bunch of 20-year-olds, you'd have an empty office forever.
Yeah,
But
it's very different. Yeah.
it's interesting, right? The difference between motivation and discipline, and the irony is, I struggle to recruit people for my own business, even though I'm in recruitment. And again, I've analyzed that, and the challenge is the best minds in the world don't go to college and school and university thinking, I want to be a recruiter, right? And in fact, banking, a lot of people fall into banking as well. Interestingly, it's not like they wanted to become a doctor or a lawyer. Banking kind of happens at the back end of your university and your graduate program. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I find it fascinating. Well, look, Dina, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. And what I'll do is I'll make sure everyone can reach out to you and connect with you, because I think what you're doing is brilliant and it's very refreshing. So thank you for taking the time today.
Okay, Paul. Yeah, thanks very much for asking me to come on as well. It was a lovely conversation with you. And I also
Likewise.
learned a lot from you about headhunting in the private banking space.
Absolutely. Well, look, it's a pleasure to speak, and we'll speak again soon. Cheers.